Good morning and welcome to the first in a series of 4 day in the life of executives from healthcare. This morning we're very honored to have Tom White, who is the President Emeritus from Jameson Health System. I have had the pleasure of knowing Tom for many years. Early in my career as a nurse administrator was at Jameson Hospital. At that time, Tom White was the CEO of the hospital. So I'm very pleased to have him as our first day in the life of, and I'm going to look to him to some questions regarding being a CEO. He has since retired from his position as CEO at Jameson, and as I said, is a CEO Emeritus, or President Emeritus at Jameson Health System. So, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Hampe, and to the students. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to inaugurate this day in the life of those of us who precede you in the world of healthcare administration, because it's a vocation, it's a profession, it's a career that I think you will find exciting and mostly beneficial, but many, many times heartbreaking. So having said that, it's a pleasure to be here.
First of all, can you explain your journey to becoming a CEO? What were the turns and twists in your career in leading up to you being a CEO, and you were a young CEO?
Well, yeah. Well, I think that to qualify that, my journey to the C-suite as an executive is not considered to be a normal journey, because I started out as a pot and pan washer at our community hospital immediately after graduating from high school, and because that was my first job in a hospital, it also allowed me the opportunity to go on to my bachelor's degree at night school. And so having done that and started, I was promoted through the ranks in various administrative positions, went up the road to becoming ultimately the assistant to the CEO of the Sharon Regional Hospital, which is now known as, then it was Sharon General Hospital. And then I graduated 7 years later, because you had to work. Graduated 7 years later with my Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration. And then my life took a dramatic turn. I was fired. Now that sounds pretty harsh, but I wasn't fired for what you might think. The president or the administrator of the hospital had been shepherding my career through his hospital, and decided that I would not be able to go any further in developing my career unless I had a credential, which was my master's in health administration. So I then went on to the University of Pittsburgh, received my master's in health administration, went up to Albany Medical Center in Albany, New York for my residency. And while I was there, the same gentleman who had been, again, shepherding my career called me and said there was a position as the assistant administrator at Jameson Hospital in Newcastle. Well, for numerous reasons, two of them being personal, I had already been married to a wonderful lady who was from one of our towns north of us, and then both our parents were living in the area, so I took the job at Jameson. Well, lo and behold, 1 year later, the administrator of the hospital died of a heart attack in the hospital parking lot. And having been there for a year, I had already made my mark, I guess, on some of the people there, and the chairman of the board came to me and said, Tom, the board had met in private session, and we have concluded that we want no interims. We want to give you the job of being administrator of the hospital. So I became very, very concerned that you think selfishly many times, what would this do to my career? Well, frankly, it would do a great deal if I was successful. My concern would be happening to my career if I fell on my head, because I had never run an institution, and this was a small hospital, 450 employees, 250 beds. By today's standards, it was considered a big hospital then, but now it's small. So I went back to my mentor, my old administrator, and I went to my program director, the CEO of the Albany Medical Center Hospital, and I asked both of them, what should I do? And I was not interviewing them simultaneously, but in both cases they said exactly the same thing. Take the job, because what if you succeed? What will that do to your career? it would be an open ticket for you. If you are able at 25 to take on that position and succeed and do well, you could write your ticket in the healthcare administration world. So I took the job, and 38 years later, I retired, having left behind, I don't know about legacies, but having left behind a larger institution, a health system actually, and so that was my journey to my achieving a CEO position. What I would say to each of you students, though, understand that's not typical today. There aren't that many positions out there where you're going to jump into the role of a CEO. Be patient in your career development, have a plan. I'm going to talk about strategic planning in a minute because Dr. Hampe, if I call her Holly, please forgive me, because when we worked together, we became very good friends and continue to be good friends. But be patient, because you have to map out your career. Have a strategic plan for your personal development and for your personal career development. This is imperative because it's a journey, and you're going to have to know where there are the turns in the road, the bumps in the road. I guess one could be somewhat critical of the way my job came about. I was in the right place at the right time. That may sound morbid, but sometimes you just have to have a little luck to be able to succeed in that way.
So a typical day as a CEO, I'm sure over the years, being in the position 38 years, your typical day has changed. And I'm sure in the 38 years, you've seen a lot of different things happen. But a typical day for a CEO, can you give the students an idea of what it was like?
Now, that's an interesting question, because I have been asked that so many times. How do you describe the typical day in a CEO's life? I start off by saying there is no such thing as a typical day in the life of a CEO, because frankly, you have to be prepared to deal with anything that comes your way. Because you are the head of the organization, everything ultimately ends up on your table. It may have been filtered by a number of people that are your subordinates. It may be changed a couple of times, but it ultimately is going to end up with you, because you are the final decision maker. Within reason, obviously. You're not making nuts and bolts decisions, but those things that are worthy of coming to your attention, and now some people, depending on their management style, want everything to come to their attention, and you will find out quickly that you can't do that. But you have to be prepared for approximately an 18-hour day, 10 to 12 of which will be spent in an office or in your facility, your hospital. The other 8 you may be spending at home doing preparatory work for the next day, giving meetings to social groups, speeches, going to fraternal clubs, Rotary clubs, Kiwanians clubs, and so on, giving talks. Because remember, you are the face of the organization. You may have 10 subordinates, but when people think of your institution, you're the name that comes up. And so you have to be prepared to be the salesperson, the public relations guru. You have to do all those things. So in those 8 hours that you're not at the hospital, you're going to be at home preparing, or in meetings with your doctors, or recruiting doctors, recruiting staff. And so that's 18 plus hours, 20 plus hours, and you may quickly say, when do I sleep? Well, you sleep whenever you can. That's what makes it no such thing as a typical day. Because quite frankly, you could fall asleep and get called at 4 o'clock in the morning, and someone would tell you there's a bomb threat. And now you have to wake up, and you have to be prepared to deal with that problem. Even though you have all these elaborate plans what to do in the event of a threat of that type, you are the person on point. So you really have to be prepared for the unexpected. You have to be prepared for the mundane. You have to be prepared for the excitement of the job, because there are so many exciting things. And it could come down to when you hear the stork sound go off in your hospital, knowing that a baby was just born, to a parent that may not have been expected to have that child, and that there was a success there. It's just a thing that you have to have a passion for. So don't expect that you're going to have a 9-to-5 job, because I know Dr. Hampe doesn't have a 9-to-5 job, because I also do some teaching at some universities around the area. And when you're dealing with you all, the students, there's not an unreasonable demand, but there's an expectation level that every student has of their professor, and that is to be there to offer assistance and guide me through this career development that I'm into. So the typical day would go whichever way you want it. Be prepared, understand that there are going to be changes, and just do the best you can daily.
And I think we've talked in the class about change being the only thing certain in healthcare. And that's you have to go with the flow. Describe the importance of a team. You talked about all of the CEO being the head of the team, but how important the members of your team are.
Oh, well, I can't say enough about being able to surround yourself with the kinds of people that can build your reputation. And I don't say that derogatorily to your team, but it is important to understand one thing about you, that is me. You don't know everything. And in the complexities of running a healthcare organization, you are dealing with people that are superiorly smarter than you. They have abilities that you'll never achieve. Doctors, nurses, technicians, specialists in the field of health administration and health delivery. You have to be able to surround yourself with those people. What you have to do is lead them. Be the leader of those individuals so that they will want to follow you on the path that you and they have designed to move forward on. Because what you're ultimately driving for is to make your organization better than it is, constantly better than it is. If you become complacent as the leader, as the CEO, your organization will follow you, and it will follow you right down the tube to mediocrity. You can't allow that to happen. So as you gather these people, make sure that these are people, one, that you can trust, two, that are not going to be yes people, that they are going to challenge you. They're going to bring, as difficult as it is for our egos, you have to understand that these people are the people you chose to guide you and help you and offer you counsel, because that's what they're ultimately doing. They know that you're going to make the final decision. But they also know for them to be an effective person, they have to give you good information. They have to bring that information to you, and they can't filter it. They have to put it out in front of you. If it's going to be a disaster, they have to tell you that. If your design is a disaster, if your goals, objectives, strategic planning is a disaster, someone in that group has to tell you. And if they tell you wrong, if they don't give you honest advice, you're going to fail. And you don't want failure in your life, because failure is unacceptable. I mean, at least that's my philosophy. I've never liked failure. I don't even like to miss by an amount that would be considered okay. I don't agree with that. I don't like mediocrity.
Medical staff is an important part of the hospital. As a CEO, did you work very closely with the medical staff?
Well, I think you have to first of all understand that the medical staff and your other healthcare professionals are the driving force behind your organization meeting its goals and meeting its objectives. And the number one objective that any hospital, in my opinion, should have is the patient comes first. Quality, safe medical care delivered in an environment that is conducive to a positive outcome. So the medical staff, being the top of the pyramid, yes, they are absolutely essential. You have, as a responsibility, however, as a board and as a CEO, you have the responsibility to credential these people. When they come and apply to your hospital and say, we want to practice medicine in your community, you have to understand that it's your obligation to the community that once you put the hospital's imprimatur on those people, you are saying to the entire community, they are what they say they are, and they are going to be good at doing what they do. So you definitely have to do that. But you have to have I don't know how personal you can get with too many people, but with a medical community, you have to make sure that they understand that you have your job, they have their job. There are going to be conflicts, but the better they understand the responsibilities that you bring to the table and understand them, you'll work them out. You'll compromise when necessary, but you'll arrive at the right conclusion. Fortunately, in a small community, you have the opportunity to be become very close to many of your medical community, your medical staff members. In our community, I knew every one of our physicians. Frankly, I recruited 90% of them. So I had an intimate knowledge of their family, of them, and I kept track of that because when one of the daughters or sons was married, I made sure that a note went off or a little gift was sent so that this rapport, this understanding that we're in this together, because they had pressures that I never would even believe. I've dealt with surgeons, for example, that were in the most complicated of surgeries, and to think that one error, one minute mistake could end up in the death of an individual or the laming of an individual for life. You can't fathom that. Now, in our world, yes, we could do some things that would cause harm to people, but they are on the cutting point. And so I think it's very important to have a trust, and I guess that's the key. If the medical community can trust you, if the individual doctor can trust you, you'll both be successful in getting your jobs done.
And, quality is important, but also finance is important too. And with any hospital, budgeting process is a strategy, it's a activity that I'm sure everybody enjoys doing.
Well, it's really interesting that you bring up the word finance in relationship to quality, because in fact you can't separate the two. I shouldn't do this, but there was a nun, and I lost her name. That comes with age, guys and gals. There was a fine nun, though, out in the Midwest, and she said, without a margin, there is no quality of care. I don't exactly subscribe to that, but I think you cannot separate the two. Finances are they are the engine that runs the organization. I personally believe that finance, a bottom line, profit, if you will, not that we're supposed to use that word, but margin, which is more acceptable, I guess, in our world today, it is imperative. And you have to budget for that. You cannot think that this money is going to fall out of heaven and just be given to you. You have to work hard at preserving the limited assets that you have available to you, and in our case, in healthcare, it's reimbursement. We all complain that reimbursement is never enough. Well, I will tell you, there is never enough money, because your people that work for you, your department heads, your management team, your board, they have an insatiable appetite to do things, to build, to spend, to hire. These are all of the things that a budget takes into consideration. So you can't separate quality of care, safety of patient care, and the growth of the institution without having finance. Now, I was fortunate that I had a number of good CFOs that had a one-track mind. I think, well, I better not say it. I think CFOs are your safeguard, but they also can be calcitrant, if you know what I mean, because they only think about money. That is the only thing that they have in their life to think about. Balance sheets, expenses, and deviation or variances from expense. They put it in their head that that's their money. Now you just try to get it away from it, and you can't, because they also control the might of the pen, and they can veto things. But that's not really true. But on the other hand, yes, budgeting is critical, and budgeting is a process. I'm a simplistic person. I always thought of budgeting being a roadmap. It was a roadmap that started at the beginnings of the process and ended up with the final approval at the board. But that wasn't where the journey ended. The journey really is, the budget is an ongoing document. It must be looked at and must be changed. And I know that's not in the vocabulary of a lot of people when they're talking about budgets, because a lot of people say, a budget is cast in iron, it's in steel, it's in cement. We'll never change that budget. Well, believe me, that budget cannot project or predict what is going to happen out there. Jameson's process, again, not simple. It's going to sound simple, but it isn't simple. We had 5 budgets. We had an a human resources budget. We had a capital improvement budget. We had a facilities plan budget. We had the revenue and expense budgets too, and they were both different. We had a revenue budget, and you could ask the question, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Well, my CFOs always believed that the revenue budget came first. The expense budget followed it. You can only spend what you have. To a degree, I agree with that. I'm debt adverse to a degree, but on the other hand, I do believe that a certain amount of debt is necessary to achieve the big things. And when we get into strategic planning, I'll elaborate a little further on that. So these budgets are all, in a sense, they start back at the department head level. And however the department heads use the formulae to arrive at their recommendations, it's up to them, basically. We never tried to micromanage that process. But the department heads would begin to think short and long term. What were their priorities? What were their short-term goals and objectives based on what the hospital's major goals and objectives were? Because we set that up at the beginning of the year. In fact, it started 4 months before the end of the fiscal year that we were operating in. We sent out to everybody our goals and objectives, which were a composite of everybody else's thinking. And then they began to develop their first recommendations, as I said, long-term and short-term. Long-term being 3 to 5 years out, short-term being 1 year out. Those requests then came to this, what we called senior management, which were their bosses, if you will. After my senior management team evaluated, paired, changed, modified, whatever way you want to think of it, they then sent that budget on to the CEO. Through numerous meetings with them and myself, we then crafted what we called the hospital's general operating budget. That then was again reviewed. We looked at it for doability or achievability, if you will. And then when we were ready, we thought we were ready, and this was a 4 or 5 month process, because you always started where our CFOs always started working on the new year's budget the day that they adopted the old budget or the operating year budget. So we would start that process and then say, okay, we're ready to go, and now you have to be careful, because once you send it on to the next level, which in our case was the finance committee, a budget committee, you sent it up there, you're recommending what's on that paper. And through their years of experience being on the board, they were able to see what was happening. They knew what was happening. They read the financial reports every month. So they put their spin on it. Some things they rejected as being too aggressive. Some things they didn't think you were aggressive enough on. So they put their thinking into the pot, and it came back to you as recommendation from that committee. You then looked at that, and in deliberations with the chairperson of the board and with others, medical staff being involved is a very critical part of budgetary process. You then finalized the document and then sent it up to the board. Now, obviously you had numbers of checks and balances on the way, because the one thing that you didn't want to have happen is that when you'd done through all this work and you sent it on to the board with the final CEO's recommendation and the executive committee of treasury people, you had to make sure it was right so that you had the votes on the board and that it would pass. In this case, they usually did. And so we went from there.
Now, with the nonprofit hospitals, you've talked about the operating margin. How important is that whenever you're getting looking at capital expenditures? Is that something that the operating margin would dictate how much you could put into capital?
Well, I think first of all, operating margins are absolutely essential when if you are going to do any kind of debt financing. If you're thinking about going into the bond market or borrowing money from a bank or wherever, you had better have a very strong not only balance sheet, but your expenses and your revenues had better be strong. If you walk in there with negative margin balances, negative margins, you won't get the money. And in today's world, capital is absolutely essential to getting anything done. I don't care if it's buying this pencil or if it's building a multi-complex building which is here, and you have a beautiful campus here at Robert Morris. I commend you all and compliment you all. You're going to get a good education, especially from her. But on the other hand, if you don't have strong margin, now, again, I say strong, we always strived for 2.5% to 5% operating margin. That is after all expenses. Had nothing to do with the endowment funds that we had, the trust funds that we had. That was not considered operating income. Operating income was from selling the product, which was healthcare, that we were producing. And what we would achieve, 2.5% to 5%. Now, there are many people in our world, my colleagues, my peers, that would say that's ludicrous. You can't function on a 3% to 5%, 2.5%, 5%. You have to have 8 to 9 to 10. Well, reality strikes. It depends on your payer mix. It depends on a number of factors, how much margin you're going to have. And not everybody can achieve the 10% margins that I know some institutions demand. This is where the conflict comes in budgeting, because you're going to have people driving for big profits, no matter the expense. I differed there. I thought, in my philosophy, and this is what every CEO must do, you're going to have to make it too. You had to have patient care priorities come first. When you started if you started compromising, because I don't believe anybody really compromises the safety of a patient in a bed or what can be given to their community to promote their health care and their wellness and all of those things that are essential to the quality of life in the community, which you're the steward of, by the way. Nobody else in your community is really, maybe the principals and superintendents of a school district have a certain amount of that going on because they're molding the life and the minds of the children, but you're getting those children and their families, and you have to take care of them from a health perspective, and health involves all of us. And so you have to have that money available, or you can't get the financing that you need.
Now, with value-based purchasing that just came out with the Obama administration, making sure that reimbursement is based on quality and value. I think this is the first time that the CFOs really paid attention to quality in that regard because of the penalties that the government was going to put on healthcare facilities if they did not provide a high quality. Do you think that value-based purchasing is the way to go? Do you think that there's merit in having reimbursement based on a level of quality?
Well, no. I think basing reimbursement on quality is key. It'll keep all of our feet to the fire. But I don't subscribe to this quality-based budgeting and so on. I think that, again, we shouldn't have, as CEOs, as healthcare professionals, we shouldn't have someone telling us that we're not going to be paid unless our quality meets a standard that they have. We should have those standards. Our standards should be high enough that nobody has to tell us that we're not going to get paid any money if we don't, save a person's life? How can't you save someone's life? How can't you put that life first? We have enough people coming into the institution. We have Joint Commission. We have the state health departments. We have Medicare. We have our own quality. That's her before life. She was a quality director, and she was, I can't say it because I'm on this tape, but she was tough. And so you have to depend on these people. They're not going to let us do dumb things. So why do we need third parties coming in and telling us our job to take care of people? That should be a given. There should be no compromise to the quality of care that we provide. Now, how we go about doing it, what are the excesses that shouldn't be there? You see, the excess will compromise the quality just as much as the shortage. Because what does the excess do? It takes away the needed resources that you may have to expend over here, and you're dumping it all over here. So I think it's a good idea to base the reimbursements on quality. I'm not too sure that I agree with all the ramifications from that, and my recent one is this readmission penalty, because someone is readmitted to the hospital within a period of time that was arbitrary in the first place, but they didn't take into account that that patient may have been admitted to the hospital with one thing, went home, and the day next all of a sudden developed a different health care condition, and they had to be readmitted. What do you want to do? Tell the people they can't be admitted? No, I don't agree with that, but
And I also agree with you on that too.
thank you. That's the first time in 40 years that she's agreed with me.
In readmissions, we don't go home with those patients.
That's right. We don't know their
we don't know
environment.
what
We don't know their environment.
they do. Well, kind of changing the direction, strategic planning. And we are in the process of learning about strategic planning and the importance of strategic planning. And how was that performed at the hospital?
Well, before the process, and again, like the budgets, this is a process. Strategic planning is a process. But I would preface that with saying, I don't think that you can reach the goals and objectives of your organization without a strong strategic, well thought out strategic plan. Because what does a strategic plan really do? It projects into the future, the foreseeable future. Jameson's process, again, not sophisticated, but, well, I shouldn't say that. It was sophisticated. We based it on 1 to 3 years. We didn't think that any plan after 3 years really had any merit, because who knew and how do you, I had a crystal ball, by the way. My staff gave me a beautiful crystal ball mounted on a bull and a bear. Now, this was a gift, that the bull being, and the bear connotating stock market, the New York stock market. The bear being bad for the stock market, the bull being good for the stock market. And it was really somewhat facetious, because nobody could predict what anything is going to be within an hour. I defy any of you to tell me what's going to happen to you tomorrow, other than having taken a test and knowing that Dr. Hampe will probably force you to study harder to get you that A, which all of you students want. I never went into a classroom not thinking that every student in that classroom wanted an A, the maximum. I said, and I had a very simple philosophy: you work for it, you'll get paid. If you don't work, you're not going to get it. So don't come to me, and I never graded on a curve. I never even knew what a curve meant, because to me it was black and white, just like the budgeting process. It was black and white, just like the strategic planning process. You started here not knowing too much, and you wanted to get here assuming that you were accurate getting there. So again, we sent it down to a strategic planning committee of the management team. We had them meet with as many people. The more input that you get to a strategic plan, the better it is. You cannot strategic plan in a vacuum. No CEO, no planning executive can think that they don't need anybody's input when they're developing the strategic direction, the strategic plan, whichever way you want to think of it, because it doesn't work that way. You have to have input, and the more input that you get, the better. Now, what you have to do, however, is synthesize to take all that information and begin to develop it into pigeonholes. What are those pigeonholes? Well, what does the building need? What do we need in personnel? What do we need in new equipment? What do we need in the number of doctors? What types of doctors? What number of nurses do we need? What type of nurses do we need? What is our facility going to look like in 5 years as the new wave of advancement in technologies in the delivery and in the healthcare world? You can't really see that, as I analogized with this crystal ball, but you have to be able to be predicting. You have to read. You have to get knowledge. So all this information must be filtered through to meet the needs of the organization. After that happens, you then have to sit down with a key group of leadership. Community leaders, doctors, nurses, other personnel, politicians, people that can lend you, again, information that will tell you what is doable and possible. From that process, then, it goes to your management, senior management team, who are your wisdom thinkers, and they begin to put their spin on it. Now, this is a negotiation. Strategic planning, like budgeting, and I should have mentioned it, it really becomes a negotiation between each of those requesters. I don't even know if that's a word. But you have all these people requesting things, spending, strategic development. They have to negotiate what is doable, what is affordable, what we can accomplish. The one thing about strategic planning, you can put all the beautiful plans in those books that you've seen on numerous planning offices, directors' offices, and numerous CEOs' offices. They hire a $25,000 a month planning consultant. They come in, they write this beautifully elaborate plan. It's a demographic plan. It's a diversity plan. It's a facilities plan. It is whatever you can think of, a plan, and there are all these books, and they're always up on the bookshelf. And then you ask the question, when was the last time you reviewed it? And you say, oh, well, we have a new 5-year plan strategy that we have to come up with. It doesn't work that way. The strategic plan is a living document. It has to be challenged, it has to be evaluated, and know that it is the fundamental document to your success. So after you get all this information synthesized, you then begin to finally put on paper, or in the computer today, I'm a yellow pad person, you begin to put it on paper in an outline. And you then begin to look at it from many, many aspects, but always keeping in mind, what is it doing to achieve the mission of the organization? Because it's the mission, whatever that mission has been designed by your boards and your people, that's what you're working for. It all comes down to, are we going to meet the mission, our contract with our community that we're going to achieve? And from there you drive it forward, and then that becomes a process, just like anything else. It's written up, it's implemented, it's proved, and then it's implemented, and you have implementation strategy, you have oversight strategy, you have a number of ways to determine whether or not you're meeting it. But again, once it's written and once it's out there, it also has to be reevaluated and it has to be modified, because you may not be. Dr. Hampe asked me to talk about one of our strategic planning initiatives that we actually had to take off the burner and hold it off and delay it, and the reason for that delay I'll get to. But so you have to understand that you may not have a straight road. You may have twists and turns, detours that you have to deal with, and the strategic plan must be flexible enough to adjust to that.
I'm glad you mentioned about the hospital's mission, because we've been talking about mission and vision and values, and doing SWOT analysis, finding out what the strengths and weaknesses, what the threats are, and what the opportunities are. You just mentioned about a project that Jameson had regarding their emergency department, and that was a big strategic plan that you were involved in. I think that was probably one of your final projects that you did before you left the CEO position.
Yeah. Well, the emergency services program was a part of a facilities programmatic master plan. We had looked at all of the programs that we provided in our complex, whether it was obstetrics, whether it was surgical, whether it was medical, whether it was pediatrics, and so on. And we knew that one of the lifebloods of our organization was the emergency service, because what we had found through our statistical analysis and our demographic analysis was that approximately 70% of our admissions were coming directly through the emergency room, because that was the state of medicine at that time. Doctors used emergency rooms as extensions of their office, especially in the late hours of their day, and so people were admitted. Not always necessarily admitted, but were admitted. Our emergency facility was built back in the 60s. No way in the world could it meet the modern trauma designations that we have today, whether it was the top trauma or the lowest level of trauma, because it was too small, it didn't have the technologies that were necessary. So we realized very quickly that it was necessary. The second department that was equally as necessary was the operating room. So we commingled the two. We commingled them in being one project. It was the ORED project, as we designated in our plan. We had to make a choice which one of the two would go first. We chose, because of the way the building physically could be built, we could build the OR and get it up and running before we needed to do the ED. We could do what they called shell space. So because our OR was also built in the early 70s, in fact it was open the year that I came to Jameson in 1972. So it was already becoming problematic. It was antiquated. Orthopedic surgeons were yelling every day they didn't have enough room. Our plastic surgeons said that in order for them to function correctly, they had to go from room to room to room, and everything had to be lined up, and so that they could do one case, another case, and then a third case, and sometimes 4 and 5 cases. We just weren't equipped for that. We had just too many bottlenecks and too many problems. So we said, okay, let's appease our surgeons, and we'll give them a new OR. So and this process, by the way, was a $25 million expenditure just for these 2 units, with some ancillary improvements, some, I won't call it window dressing, but some needed improvements. So we went ahead, and all of a sudden we started running out of money. For numerous reasons why, but we knew that we were going to have a shortfall. We were tapped out a little bit in the first go round for additional borrowing, and so we had to delay. That's when the board became very involved, because all along the way they were oversighting and they were monitoring, and we were giving them the best information that we had. We told them that we were running short of about $5 to $8 million. Where do you get $5 to $8 million? We never had a major capital campaign at the Jameson. We just believed that you had to pay your own way. But neither here nor there. That was philosophical. We decided we'd go out and ask the public if they would help offset these problems, some of these financial problems. So we developed a capital campaign committee, went out. It had a 3-year objective to raise $8 million. First 2 years, money started coming in very well. Good stuff was happening. Raised $3.5 million without even trying. Well, then in any campaign to ask people for money, we ran into the stumbling block of the, how do they call it, the low-hanging fruit had already been picked. Now we had to go to the top of the tree. And that was a little bit more difficult, because now we had to maneuver our way through the asking of money to groups that had already been committed to major commitments through our community. So we got stymied there for a while. But then the federal government, the state government, and additional benevolence benefactors came through, and we were able to get the money. And then we started the process. But in this period of time, which maybe was a godsend, if you will, we had a chance to go back and reevaluate. As I said, it's a living document. We went back and said, are we nearsighting this emergency service? And are we building it wrong, given what's happening in healthcare? And healthcare, by the way, changes daily. In fact, every minute there's a new process coming out. You just go into future healthcare thinking, and you will see what the people that are influencing your life are going to be thinking about, and already is coming to fruition. There's nothing out there that is going to remain the same, and I don't care what it is. Surgery is now being done by robotics. Next thing is an ingestible surgical procedure. For gastric surgery, you're going to ingest a pill. It's going to go down. It's going to go specifically to the target area, because they'll have tracers, and it's not a drone. But it'll get in there, and it will do certain things chemically that will eradicate the condition. So there's change going on. So we brought the doctors back in. We brought additional people, architects and so on. And we, in fact, changed the physical footprint of the ED. But because we had an open space that was conducive to that, we didn't lose anything, because we had no walls up. There was nothing there that was in concrete. So, the paper was being designed. So we did all that, and came out with what I'd have to say is one of the finest emergency services department in western Pennsylvania, well, certainly in northwestern Pennsylvania. In recent negotiations that the hospital is in from its strategic play that's underway now, it's one of the selling points.
You had mentioned about having to regroup because of the shortfall of finances. In retrospect, was there something that could have been seen? Do you look back on that, and was there anything that, hindsight's 2020, that caused, was it reimbursement that would have caused a change in the amount of resources that would have been available for building?
Well, no, I don't think that was the issue. I think what we were trying to do initially was overreach. And in overreaching, we had designs on becoming a trauma center, which everybody wanted to be designated. You know, we all love the ego-building titles, trauma center, phase one, or whatever those things are. But that was part of it. But it really became a reality check. We just didn't have the money, the capital to do what we wanted to do. And it was a good thing, though, in a sense that we held up, because what we have now is phenomenal and affordable.
One of the case studies that was in the assignment for the graduate students was regarding opening up a open heart surgery and opening up a cath lab. And, you know, one of the things with that was identifying a physician that would be in charge of that program and how key that person is with the opening of that cardiac program. Was there ever any programs that you had that were so tied to a physician being connected with the hospital? And, you know, we talked about in this case study, if the physician decided to go someplace else, the program would essentially not get off the ground. I don't know if there's anything similar that Jameson would have had.
Top of head comes that quick was our development of our cancer center. Back in 1973, after I became CEO, and not because of that, but I became the CEO, we recognized that one of the biggest killers in our Lawrence County and Mercer County areas was carcinoma, cancer. And we had a decision to make because competitors around were jumping in to putting in cancer centers, and they were putting in radiation therapy units. This is treating the cancer with radium, the traditional way, the tried and true way. We aligned ourselves at that time with Dr. Joe Concannon. He was the chairperson of the cancer program at Allegheny General Hospital. Eminent in his field, a man from Boston, just really understood cancer. So we engaged with him because we had relationships with the CEO. You know, in this world, you're going to understand, you have a boy and a girl network that is indispensable to many things that you're going to be doing, because you pick up the phone, you call the CEO, Jeff Romoff, Harold Liebs, or wherever. These are names that you may remember, you may know Mr. Romoff. But you pick up the phone and you call him and say, I have an idea. Can I accomplish this? And what can you do to help? Same thing. We picked up the phone, we called the CEO of Allegheny General and said, we want to start a cancer program. We understand that your program is one of the preeminent in the country. What can we do? They put us in touch with Dr. Concannon, and Dr. Concannon got very energized with this. It gave him an opportunity to do some things. But the first thing he said was, what we have to do is, I don't want to go back and retrace radiation therapy. Is Jameson prepared to commit to buying a linear accelerator? Linear accelerator was becoming the nouveau in eradicating cancerous tumors. And so we bought into it because of Dr. Concannon. So to answer your question, yes, these people are essential. And without doubt. But again, you have to be careful, because if you're buying into one, you have to make sure that they have a team of people that can immediately jump in if something happens. Because as I said, there is no predictability. Fortunately for us, Dr. Concannon went on a number of years, saw us to 3 or 4 different iterations of our cancer therapy program. Now we have a cancer facility, no longer with the Allegheny cancer, it's now with Hillman. But you make changes, yes. But he and his team of people were absolutely the foundation and the catalyst to make it work.
Perfect. How about the board of directors? How involved is the CEO with the board of directors, the chairman of the board?
Well, I think, first of all, as an executive in a healthcare facility, you have to understand that these relationships are key. Now, there are numerous case, you mentioned case report, there are numerous case studies as to how much involvement should a board have. Fortunately for me, I only had 3 board chairmen in my entire tenure at the hospital. Well, 4, I'm sorry. And they all were very, very strong-minded executives in their own right. Not one of them ever decided that his course or her course, in my case it was all men, that they would direct the board as a whole to get involved with micromanagement. Board's responsibility is policy direction and oversight. Staff, management, they are the operating people. They must implement policy. How they arrive at policy, you have a great deal to do with, because you're formulating plan, you're formulating opinion, you're giving them recommendation, and how good you are at maneuvering. I was going to say manipulating, but that's the wrong word. Many times it is manipulating. But you're moving this through. Now you have a diverse board, because what is a board of a not-for-profit supposed to be? It is supposed to be representative of every constituent that you have in your community. The wealthiest, the poorest. It doesn't make any difference how you characterize it. But they have to be assigned a responsibility around that table. So it would be very, very destructive for a CEO and the team to not have a good working relationship with their board. Now, in our case, we had 25 board persons. There are a lot of people say those boards are too big. You should only have the maximum size in today's modern management thinking, or board thinking, is 9 to 11. That's the manageable number. That may be okay for a corporate board, but I think, again, if we are following the responsibility of a community health care center or a health provider, you have to get the input from the people. Those are the people that you're designing the protocols for. I mean, if you don't know what's bothering people in the most affluent community, or I just looked at Dr. Hampe, because we there's affluence in healthcare and there's need in healthcare, and sometimes you happen to be associated with a very good community that is affluent, and sometimes you're associated with places like I was in New York, and you go to the Bronx and forget it. You're lucky, that they could use used equipment, but not medical equipment, but some things. But on the other hand, you don't know those things unless you're asking the people that reside in those areas, or you're at least asking a constituent representative that they know what's going on. And so you have to have a big enough board to get those thought processes going. Again, don't be naive, please. In your young career development, don't be naive. You is not going to be, I was going to say ain't, but I'm not allowed to say that. So you is not going to be liked by all your board members. Now, you think that you at least could have a working relationship that's positive, and if it gets too negative, you better know about it, and you better do something to reconcile it. But on the other hand, every person that sits at that table, they have a pet project, they have a pet peeve, they have heard something, because you're not liked. You're making decisions hourly, or every minute, if you will. And those decisions are not going to be embraced by everybody as being the positive thing that you think they are. There's an Italian saying that's mens amens. It's 50-50. My mother used to tell me that you're going to make a decision amongst 2 people. Understand, one of those 2 people, if it doesn't satisfy them, they're not going to like it. And that's what goes on in decision making. The philosophy of decision making is you can't please everybody. You want to try to get as many people to the center of the agreement as you possibly can. So think about it. But the most important relationship, and I am personally convinced of this, the most important relationship you have is with the chairperson of the board, because it's the chairperson that serves numerous roles for you. Aside from the fact that they are your boss. Now, yeah, the board appoints you, they retain you, they evaluate, but it's the chair that has the capacity to maneuver minds, to change minds, to get people to agree. So as close as you can work with the board, always keep them current, and don't buy into the trap that they're going to accept everything that you're going to say because you're buddy-buddy. No happens. Does not happen, because their reputation is just as important as yours. So what you give to them, it better be honest, it better be correct, and you had always better be trustworthy. Do not try to, because there's a problem, don't taint it. If it ain't good, fix it. You know what I mean? So be careful with that relationship, because not only are they your boss, they become your confidant. They become your sounding board. They really become your crying towel, frankly, because these people, now you're not showing weakness when you're exhibiting these kinds of issues, because they know these are truly tested people. They are out there, and that's why the selection, and someday I'll come back, Holly, and we'll talk about board relationships if I can, and I'll tell you about the board selection and how you do that. But the board chair is the most mature, may not be chronologically the most mature, but they basically are the most mature thinkers sometimes that you have on the board. So they are your key go-to person. And you just can't function as an effective CEO without a good relationship with your board and your chairman.
What did you like best about being a CEO?
Oh, in 38 years, that's a tough question. I guess to sum that up, I liked, one, the people of the organization, the people of the community that we were touching. I had a strong human resource desire. I wanted to treat our people good, make sure that they were well taken care of for numerous ways, but also that we were doing the right thing for the community. And then what was most gratifying was to watch us go from a single hospital of 420 employees when I first, it wasn't that many, 300 some employees when I first started, up to being a fully integrated healthcare system with over 1,500 employees. I love that ability to build that. Frankly, that's why I never left the hospital. I was given many opportunities to go to bigger, more prestigious, much more money, if you will. But I was driven by the opportunities that I was being presented in our community to build something that wasn't there in the first place, and that was what was most gratifying to me. So it was providing very good quality of care to the people of our community and working with the people in the organization. That's what was most important.
I'm sure there were things that you didn't like about being the CEO. What would they? Anything that you didn't?
Oh yeah. I mean, getting my ego bruised. no. It's not so much what you don't like. It becomes a frustration of having to go back and redo the things that you thought that you had planned out. I made some terrible mistakes as a CEO, and those were my frustrations. The errors that I made, my judgment was tainted, or my judgment wasn't sharp enough and focused enough that I allowed certain things to persuade me, and I didn't do as good a job as I should have. Now, were they cataclysmic? No. Were they recoverable? Yes. But on the other hand, I'm not a perfectionist per se, but it did bother me to make those errors.
In hindsight's always 20/20, and
Oh.
I'm sure you remember those things probably much more than remember the things that you were successful
I
in.
wish I had a dime for every Monday morning quarterback correction. Because just like with this game that just finished, we were sitting around earlier debating the issue of should the pass been thrown, should he run the play. Well, I want to tell you something. Monday morning, everybody knew the right thing to do, but Sunday evening at 3 minutes to go, or 3 downs already in, or 2 downs, whatever. I didn't even watch the game. But on the other hand, that's the heat of battle, and you, as a CEO, as an executive in a healthcare facility, you're going to be in that man's position more times than you will ever know, and you are only going to have a split second to make the right decision. And sometimes you're going to be making that decision on your feet. And heaven help you if you make it wrong, because everybody's going to come out of the woodwork. Even some of your best friends are going to criticize you. Mm-hmm. And that hurts. Ego, it hurts. It hurts mentally. Your mind goes wacko when you start getting all these criticisms.
If these individuals out there are looking one day to be part of a healthcare organization, what traits would you look for if you were looking for someone to assist you in your role as a CEO, just as you were? What type of traits would that be?
Well, I think, many of these kind of things are well documented because it's a profile that they make. You now have computer profiling on what the best executive is going to look like or should look like. But I'm a simple person. I grew out of a steel-making town, just like a lot of people in those days, and so as I said in the beginning of this program, this lecture, I started out having to work in a hospital. I had numerous jobs before that, but my first real job was working in the pot and pan, and I had to work through undergraduate work. So I look for a very hard-working person, and that comes in many ways. You can profile that anyway. Honesty, trustworthiness, loyalty. I think these are some of the key personality type things that you have to look at. What is their knowledge of the field they're going into? What has their breadth of experience been? Now, I don't subscribe necessarily that everybody has to have all the experience because I didn't have it. I mean, if they were hiring me for the CEO job based on my experience as being an executive, I should never have been hired because I had 1 year. Now, granted, I understood healthcare and healthcare delivery to a degree, but so it's the breadth of the knowledge that you have about the profession you're going into, and you could frankly get that from Dr. Hampe because she's got that. On the other hand, you also have to have a broad understanding of life. Now, again, having said that, I realize that a lot of you students may not have had the maturities of life that many of us have, but on the other hand, you have to have a well-rounded kind of a personality. You can't be so focused that everything is black and white. So I look at that. I look at the balance that individuals have in their life. Do they understand that if they're married, that the life of the family is important? If they're not married and they have significant others, that's a part of life. Their family commitments, are they committed to something outside of their professional pursuits? Whatever those might be, I look for that. And then I look at, can they and will they be a team player? Because, again, they're going to be working with others. And if they don't understand that they have to be able to work with those people to get things accomplished, then I'm not really looking for them. And I guess lastly, do they understand thinking outside the box? Because I have always, again, subscribed to another saying, action implements ideas, but it's the great ideas that change the world. And if you're not thinking outside the box, you're never going to see those new ideas as they present themselves. So you have to grasp them, and so those are the things, those are the qualities that I look for. Finally,
what advice would you give to the students? You went through a health administration program. You have been a student. You've been a educator. What advice would you give to these students as they continue their career in pursuit of that degree?
Well, I think this is going to sound trite to some of you, but continue to work hard. And I know you're working hard, so I'm not concerned about that, but continue it. Continue expanding your knowledge base, whether it's in healthcare administration or it's in life knowledge. Expand it. Dr. Hampe and I were talking at the wonderful opportunities that are available here in this cathedral of education, if you will. Take advantage of them. Continue to go to school. Take courses. Take things that are available to you. Build your knowledge base, but keep knowledge going. Be a lifetime student, quite frankly. Be patient with your career goals. Again, remember, the world in healthcare is collapsing somewhat now, so there won't be that many top-level jobs available when you come out of your graduate field. That's not to say that there won't be positions, but be patient. You may have to take something that you didn't want to take. You think maybe it's below you and beneath you. Don't go that route. Take it, start working hard at it, be achieve things, show people ahead of you that you are an asset. You see, you are something that can be a good asset for the organization because you're offering something that may be needed. Do not be afraid to take a chance. Know that there are opportunities out there, and you may have to take it. You may have to move. You know, I have heard so many people tell me, "I'm sorry, I can't take that job in Phoenix, Arizona, because I don't want to leave Western Pennsylvania." Why? Unless it's something that is absolutely imperative that you stay. Take a chance. Go out to Phoenix, Arizona. Go to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Go where there are jobs. Because you may not get a job here in Western Pennsylvania right now, the way this healthcare field is changing. I don't know what your placement people are saying, but I only see that from a practical perspective. You have to get your foot in the door. So, and you have to gain certain experiences. So that's why that first position that you take. Now, be careful. Don't take a dead end situation. Know that there's growth in that facility or that organization that you're going to. Don't go to a place that's bankrupt. Look at their balance sheets just as much as you're going to look at yours when you graduate, and make sure that they are not going to fold up by 1 year after you're there. So you have some preparatory work to do, which is why I said design a strategic plan for your career. Know where you want to get to and how you're going to get there. What resource allocation do you have to have? What amount of what I want to say? How much hard work do you have to have? Find someone that can be your mentor right now. Be a confidant to you, because those are the people that you can go to. And if you can get close to someone that's in a healthcare profession, your professors around the campus and so on, find those people and ask them, can they call on you occasionally? Not to be someone that you're going to be with, joined at the hip. That doesn't work. But that they can mentor you. They can offer you advice. They can give you a direction, but also they can tell you when you're thinking wrong. And then I would highly recommend, once you graduate, no matter where you are, stay close to your school and your faculty, because this will be the well from where you're going to draw an awful lot of those kinds of people that you're going to need in the future. Your faculty is a great reserve for you. They are a great resource for you. Be close. Now, I'm not saying I know the university would like to give them money. That's a given. But this is not a commercial for giving. But I would stay close to the university. I'm very committed to Pitt, very committed to Youngstown State University. Now it's a state university. I like Robert Morris. I gave a speech here I guess it's been a while now, on management. So, be close to them. And that's what I would offer.
Perfect. And I think, we've talked in the classes about being patient and not wanting to jump right into the CEO position. And sometimes we think that that's where we need to be right away. And I can remember, it was at Jameson. I was the assistant director of nursing, and I had a young nursing student interviewing me, and I asked what they'd like to do, and they said, "I'd like your job." And at that time I had probably 11 or 12 years of experience and I think that's so important that we give patience to the career.
Well, that's interesting, because then I was articulating off what are the characteristics of who I look for. That's also one of them. But you should have people, you should employ people that want your job, because they're going to have the industry, they're going to have the drive to continue to get ahead. And, I've always said that the mark of a bad administrator or leader is the people that are under them don't want to get ahead. They're complacent. They feel comfortable letting you make all the decisions, and they don't. No, you want people that are pushing, man, because then what you can do is you can get them a job. You can pick up that phone, call someone that you know that is looking for a good, strong candidate for an assistant administrator's position, or an assistant CEO. What do they call them now? Executive. I don't know what they call them.
COOs? Or...
Yeah, chief operating officer, There's so many job opportunities out there, so don't get complacent in that thinking either.
And I think, as you said, networking is so important.
Oh.
It is a lifeline. As you said, you can pick up the phone and call someone out there that you can connect with, and I think that's so important for a young person.
The greatest Rolodex file, I had my Rolodex file. Now you don't think in those times. In fact, some of you may not even know what a Rolodex is, but it was the
I still
old.
have mine.
I have mine too, and it's filled with valuable information. It's a roll thing. Now you have the computer. You punch in everything in the computer. But I will also tell you this: as you go through your life experiences, keep a diary. Keep a chronology of what it is that you are doing, because you have to learn from your past mistakes. You also have to learn, equally as important, in fact more important, from your past successes. Mark it down, just one little word. I've kept a diary for years. I'm not an author, but I'm trying to write a book on the practical application to the practical side of administration. Because all too often we get caught up in the technical sides. There's a practical side. Like I said, how do you deal with the board? How do you deal with the disgruntled person in your community? What, do you pass them off? Don't do those things. So there's a lot to do, but keep your focus. Keep your focus, because that is the key. You are responsible for you. Not philosophizing.
I want to thank you very much for the time that you've spent. And students, as you have viewed this interview, I'm sure there'll be questions that you have. One of the parts of the assignment will be for you to list out questions that you would have for Mr. White, as far as from your perspective. There may be questions that went unanswered today. Maybe there was things that were said that caused you to think of other things. So as we prepare the assignment, I want you to keep in mind those things and jot down the questions, and we'll have the opportunity to have Mr. White address those questions. But I want to thank you very much.
It's been a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you all very much. And I would say this: good luck in your career, no matter which channel it takes. Good luck to you all.